Hello and welcome to the third video I'm making on my custom crossed gantry 3D printer. We're going to go over the changes I've made since the last video, go over what the print quality is like at the moment, and then talk about some future changes. So, like I mentioned in the last video, the two main changes that we were going to make to this machine were swapping out the chamber, the enclosure, and also changing the kinematics a bit to make everything a bit more lightweight. I've done both of those things now. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. So yeah, let's talk about that. So the first thing is the chamber. I've ditched all of the plexiglass. I found I didn't feel like I was getting enough insulation from them as I really needed. And with those plexiglass being removed, I basically replaced those with printed chamber panels. I printed these out of glass fiber filled ABS. They're basically just large panels that are 1 centimeter thick and for the most part hollow, just a very low density gyroid infill. And additionally, the brackets that you use to connect these to the frame, those are also new. So everything's basically a little bit thicker and also a little bit simpler. The first version of the chamber that I built with the plexiglass, it was actually quite complicated to install. There was a very specific order of operations to things, and that made it just, first of all, it's just very annoying and tedious to install, but also if I want to make changes or do any kind of maintenance, it just made that a lot harder than it needs to be. There was still a little bit of that with this new chamber to an extent, particularly with order of operations, but it's better than the first version, and I didn't have too many problems putting it together. I made a couple of mistakes in the CAD, like put wrong hole placement or whatever, but for the most part it went together quite well. And with the new chamber, the new panels, it of course comes with new brushes. So in the first version, we had this white fluff as the brush seals. Just as a little recap, if you haven't seen the first two videos, this printer, one of the concepts it's trying to explore is having separate cold and hot areas. So basically, you have your warm print chamber, but I try and keep everything that can be out of the chamber, and the tool head and the cross beams for the kinematics, they reach through these brush seals to try and keep some air in while allowing the rods to be able to move freely through. And these bristles were just crap. They're more fluff than bristles. They're too short. They deform too quickly. The hairs, they come out too easily. I think they were a good proof of concept, but these brushes just had to go. So I replaced them with these much sturdier nylon bristles. Now these are actual bristles, like they're I probably should measure what the diameter of the bristles are, but they're a lot thicker, they're a lot sturdier. Like if you tug on them, they're not coming out of the fabric backing, and also they're a lot longer, which means when you pass the rods through these, they're not bending as much. There's basically a much higher bend radius, so they're less prone to deforming over time. Because yeah, the less you bend something relative to its total length, the less it's going to deform. And these being longer, they don't bend as much relative to their total length. And these I think these are much better than the first version. They're a little awkward to mount. What I ended up doing is basically just using VHB double-sided tape, sticking it to the back, and then just pasting it in. I think you could say this is a little bit haphazard. Is that the right word? Like if I wanted to make any significant change, like move things or do some certain types of maintenance, it would be kind of awkward having to then, you know, remove these sheets and then use new tape to stick them back on. But I'm willing to live with that for now. It's not that big of a deal. And yeah. Something to keep in mind with these bristles, and one issue I did have, is that because these are a lot thicker and sturdier, they do actually take some force to move through. This wasn't so much a problem with the XY kinematics, but for Z, this was particularly a problem, because the way I initially placed these bristles, I had basically 2 rows of them kind of pressed up against each other, and this actually was stiff enough of an arrangement that when I tried to move my bed down, it kind of got trapped. So basically the nuts on my spindles, they continued moving down, and then my bed just stayed in place. Because I have the decoupled Z-axis with the Wobble X system, so it was able to do that. So I actually had to remove some of the bristles. I'm actually using less than I originally planned, just because moving through them took too much effort for the machine. And yeah, so that is something to keep in mind, that you don't want to go overboard with having too many rows of this stuff intersecting, because it does actually take some effort to move through. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way the chamber is turning out. It does what it says on the tin. The relative, the total area, the total volume of air that needs to be warmed now is a lot less, so it's able to warm up quicker and maintain a slightly higher temperature in the chamber. And I think also just looks a bit better. I'll put some video over this. It just looks a bit nicer. It's a little bit bodged at the moment because I've got just aluminium tape taking up any cracks and stuff like that. But I think it looks a lot more solid, a lot more industrial, I guess. Yeah, there are probably a couple little tweaks I'll do in the future, but there's no rush in them. Just there are some areas where there's little cracks, little gaps that maybe need to be plugged. Areas where maybe a little bit of additional insulation might help. But overall, I'm pretty happy. One thing that didn't go so well with the chamber is the lid. So this is my lid at the moment. It's not like on a hinge or anything. It basically just sits directly on top of the machine. I have these little alignment segments in each corner to help it stay in place each time. And this thing's really heavy. It's made of 2020 profiles and a shitload of plexiglass. So this thing is just really awkward to use, and I need to rethink this. This is the most bodged, underbaked part of the chamber at the moment, is the lid. It's just kind of, it was a bit of an afterthought. And also, I ran out of money at this point of the build, and I didn't want to buy new VHB tape, because I ran out of VHB tape before I stuck these bristles into the lid. So I kind of had to awkwardly use screws and these little clamp things to fix them in place, which didn't really, it works. It doesn't really work as well. It's not holding the ends of the bristles exactly where I want them to be. So there's like a little bit of a gap. There's like a little bit more of a gap between the 2 rows of bristles than I would want there to be. Sucks, but I think eventually I'll just buy some VHB tape and actually properly stick everything into place, and maybe eventually I'll rethink the design of this and make it all printed instead of using so many aluminium profiles, because the weight of this thing is just entirely impractical. Yeah, I think that's it for the chamber. It's good. I like it. I'm happy with the changes I've made. Now moving on to the lightweight tool head gantries and kinematics that we were planning on doing. So the tool head now looks a bit different. I basically just kind of trimmed well, I just added a bunch of radiuses all around all around it. I basically trimmed off some of the fat of the tool head to save a few grams. The main way I was going to try and reduce the weight was switching from the long linear bearings, so the short ones, and switching from the solid crossrods to hollow crossrods. So using the short bearings, that was an immediate no-go. I had to completely backtrack on that because there was too much play in them. And they weren't providing the stiffness that I wanted, so I immediately switched back to the long linear bearings, which is unfortunate, but is what it is. And then the hollow linear rods, it took me a while to notice, and it's a little embarrassing that it took this long to notice, but I was just having issues where when I was printing with higher accelerations and lots of like short movements, I was just getting this awful rattling noise. It sounded like something was completely loose, and I wasn't sure what it was. I thought there wasn't enough tension on the linear bearings, so I even like changed the housing so you could screw them down tight. But what it turns out is that the hollow linear rods that I was using are actually a couple hundredths of a millimeter smaller in diameter than the solid rods I was using. So they just the passung, the fit between the rods and the bearings it was crap. It was not usable, and yeah, it was. Yeah. I'll play some video. You can hear it really. It's very loud, the rattling. And so I've had to actually switch back to solid rods, which is a real shame because the hollow rods, they provided around 120 grams of weight saving per rod, which is really good. And while hollow rods were in, although the rattling was an issue, like the actual speeds that you could get to were very impressive. I think the fastest I tried to do with just like a speed test macro was 50k excel, 1000 millimeters per second, or was it? No, it was I did 40k excel, 1000 millimeters per second. And it handled that fine. I also did a few tests with much higher accelerations, up to 80k acceleration, but then lower speeds. But yeah, it was moving very fast and everything, but ultimately not having a rattly tool head is more important than just raw potential speed. Yeah, so, and look, even though I don't have those weight savings anymore, it's still fast. It's still a fast machine. For my normal printing profile that I'm using, I still use like 25k for accelerations and like 10k for most other moves, and it does that. It handles it fine. Like ultimately, maybe this machine isn't the best for making speed benches, but just for regular printing, it's fine. It's fine. Maybe in the future I can find hollow rods that are the right fitment, but at least the crappy AliExpress ones that I bought were too small, which is a shame, but is what it is. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with the state of the machine. Granted, there is a lot of work that needs to be done, but like just the general, like the quality that I can get just from my normal standard printing profiles, the quality I'm getting, I'm perfectly happy with. It's matching the GD+4, which is my other machine that I mostly use, and does it. I am quite happy with it. Like today I printed this little tolerance test, and it gets all the way down to the 10mm tolerance and moves freely still. No, 0.10. I'm so stupid. 0.1mm tolerance. It still moves fine. Yeah. I'll put a couple of pictures up of just examples of prints. I am generally pretty happy with the print quality I'm getting, but there are, oh, something fell off. There are still some changes that need to be made. Just generally, I don't think it's a very polished package yet. My cables are not as well organized as they really should be. You can just see there's just cables all over the place. It's covered in aluminium tape to seal up cracks and stuff like that. So I think these are things that I will just kind of change and work on slowly. I think that I'm happy and confident enough with the machine that this isn't going to be my primary focus going forward. There are some other projects I want to start working on. In particular, there's a type of HBOT printer I want to build, but we'll continue work on this, just slowly changing little things, adding little bits and bobs around the place. But it's not going to be my primary focus going forward for a while, because ultimately, even though it's not a particularly polished package at the moment, it prints. It prints with good quality, and that's that. That's all I really need. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I've done since the last video that I need to speak about. No, not really. Oh, the stiffness of the bed. Yeah, so in the last video I mentioned the stiffness of the bed was a problem, particularly there's lots of short high acceleration movements. The bed itself actually starts to wobble, and this was for a couple of reasons. First of all, the bed, or the Z-axis I'm using at the moment, it basically has just a bunch of 8mm linear rods kind of going through the bristles into the chamber, and then it has these little sliding components on it that the bed sits on. And previously I was using just regular LM8 UU linear bearings on these 8mm rods, and they basically can slide quite freely, which just made it much easier for the bed to shake. So what I've done is replace all of those with just dryland, so just plastic linear bearings, just so there's more resistance on those little Z-sleds. And then I've also had to, because there's now more resistance, the bed, when it's like tilting around, like for Z-tilt correction, it had a tendency for the balls, like the steel balls attached to the bed, to kind of pop out of their sockets. So what I've also had to do is kind of attach the bed with springs to the little Z sleds to keep the balls pulled in. I realize I'm not describing it quite well. I'll put some pictures, but all of this basically has, for the most part, solved the Z-wobble problem I was having. Now, if you start really printing with quite high speeds and accelerations, you will start to see it again. The bed is not as stiff as you might see on other similar sized machines, but with the normal printing profiles I'm using, which use relatively high accelerations and pretty decent speeds, you don't see it anymore. So I'm calling that fixed. I think that at some point in the future, I should rethink the Z-axis to make everything a little bit stiffer. But for now, I'm just going to leave it. Like I said, this is my primary focus at the moment, or going forward. So that's a change that's down the road somewhere. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. There are a couple little quirks about this machine, particularly with the just the cross gantry kinematics and stiffness, that I've had some struggles with, but I think that I might speak about those in a separate video, because I think I'll speak about those in a separate video, because there are just some weird, having a cross gantry printer where it's not perfectly stiff, you come across certain issues with racking that I didn't really expect going into this build. But yeah, I'll speak about those another time. In any case, thank you for watching. If you've watched the other two videos, thank you for watching those. Yeah, I've really enjoyed building this printer, and although there is some work that needs to be done still, I'm very happy with how it's turned out, and I'm quite happy with the results. Yeah, if you've got any questions at all, please leave a comment or reach out to me on Discord. Yeah, thanks for watching.